The phone stayed silent. Days turned into weeks, and still nothing from my grandson. When I finally asked why, his answer cut deeper than he realized. "Grandpa, I'm just too busy for you." At first, the sting of those words left me speechless. After everything I had sacrificed for him, I was nothing more than someone not worth his attention. But then, something inside me changed. If he thought I wasn't worth a minute of his time, I'd give him news that would shake his whole world. My name is Will Johnson. I'm 71 years old, and today I'll show you how even the arrogance of youth can be turned into justice, dignity, and a lesson they'll never forget. Before I share the full story, I just ask one thing. Hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to the moment my grandson told me he was too busy for me, and the silence on that phone became the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March when I made that call, the kind of day when the Arizona sun streams through my kitchen window, warming the coffee mug I've used every morning for the past 20 years. My wife Sarah had been gone for 3 years now, and these quiet moments in our house sometimes felt heavier than a man should bear alone. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Tyler's number. My grandson, 20 years old, a junior at Arizona State University, studying business with dreams as big as the Grand Canyon. At least that's what I thought he was doing. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I could picture him in his dorm room, or maybe that fancy apartment near campus that I'd been secretly helping to pay for. When he finally answered, his voice carried that distracted tone that every grandparent knows too well. "Hey, Grandpa, what's up?" "Tyler, son, I was just thinking about you. How are your classes going? It's been almost a month since we talked." A pause. In the background, I could hear music and laughter, young voices calling out about some party or event. My grandson was living the college life I'd never had the chance to experience, thanks to my early enlistment in Vietnam when I was barely 18. "Yeah, classes are fine. Listen, Grandpa, I'm actually pretty swamped right now. Can this wait?" Something twisted in my chest. Swamped. Too busy for a 5-minute conversation with the grandfather who'd raised him after his father walked out when he was 12. Too busy for the man who'd taught him to drive, helped him with homework, and sat through every baseball game in the scorching Phoenix heat. "I understand you're busy, Tyler. College is important. I just wanted to hear your voice. Maybe catch up a little. It doesn't have to be long." Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice carried an edge of impatience that cut through me like a blade. "Grandpa, I'm just too busy for you right now, okay? I've got friends over and we're heading out soon. I'll call you back sometime." The line went dead. I sat there in my kitchen, staring at the phone screen, watching Tyler's name fade back to my contact list. Too busy for me. The words echoed in the sudden silence of my house, bouncing off the walls, where pictures of Tyler's childhood still hung like monuments to a relationship I thought we'd built on love and respect. I walked to the living room, where Sarah's reading chair still sat by the window, and sank into my own recliner. On the side table was a framed photo from Tyler's high school graduation. Him in his cap and gown, arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning like we'd conquered the world together. I remembered what he'd whispered to me that day. "Grandpa, I couldn't have done this without you. You're my hero." My hero. Too busy for me now. For the first hour, I felt nothing but hurt. The kind of deep, aching disappointment that settles in your bones when someone you love treats you like an inconvenience. I thought about calling him back, maybe apologizing for interrupting his important college social life. Maybe asking when would be a better time to talk to my own grandson. But then something shifted. I started thinking about the bank statements I'd been reviewing just that morning, the automatic transfers that had been going out every month for the past 3 years. Tuition payments, rent for that apartment, car insurance, spending money. Nearly $200,000 over 3 years, all flowing from my retirement account to support Tyler's education and lifestyle. Tyler didn't know it was coming from me. His parents, my daughter Karen, and her husband Mike, had been struggling financially since Mike's construction business hit hard times during the recession. They'd been too proud to ask for help directly, so I'd arranged it quietly. As far as Tyler knew, his parents were somehow managing to pay for his expensive college experience. The boy, who was too busy for me, was living a life funded entirely by the grandfather he couldn't spare 5 minutes to talk to. I pulled out my laptop and did something I'd never done before. I looked up Tyler's social media accounts. What I found there made my jaw clench, with something that wasn't quite anger yet, but was definitely heading in that direction. Photos from just last weekend. Tyler at some upscale restaurant in Scottsdale, raising a glass of what looked like expensive champagne. The caption read, "Living my best independent life. Nobody to answer to, nobody telling me what to do. This is what freedom feels like. Independent life. Freedom from having anyone tell him what to do." I scrolled further. More photos from spring break just 2 weeks ago. Tyler on a beach in Cabo San Lucas, surrounded by friends, designer sunglasses reflecting the Mexican sun. The trip that had cost $3,000, according to the credit card statement I'd received and paid without question. Another post, this one from a few days ago. Some people spend their whole lives being dependent on others. Not me. I'm building my own empire, making my own way, self-made and proud of it, self-made, with money I'd been quietly transferring from the account where I kept Sarah's life insurance settlement. I closed the laptop and sat in the growing darkness of my living room. Outside, the Phoenix evening was settling into the kind of desert quiet that makes you think about big decisions. The kind of quiet that had surrounded me in the jungle 50 years ago, when split-second choices meant the difference. Between coming home and being shipped back in a box, Tyler thought he was independent. Thought he was self-made. Thought he was too busy for the grandfather who'd been bankrolling his entire fantasy. It was time my grandson learned about real independence. It was time he discovered what busy actually looked like when nobody was there. To catch you when you fell. I reached for my phone and opened my banking app. For 3 years I'd been setting up automatic transfers without thinking twice about it. Tonight I was going to learn exactly how to cancel them, all of them. The next morning I woke up with the kind of clarity that comes after a sleepless night of hard thinking. Coffee tasted different when you're planning to teach someone the most important lesson of their life. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, 3 years of bank statements spread out like evidence in a courtroom case. The numbers told a story Tyler had never bothered to ask about. Monthly tuition payments, $3,800. Apartment rent, $2,500. Your payment for that red Mustang he loved so much, $450. Insurance, $200. Monthly allowance that I justified as textbook and meal money, $800. Then there were the extras. Spring break trips, weekend getaways, restaurant bills that would make a retired veteran wince. Total monthly support, $6,750. Over 3 years, $243,000, nearly $250,000. Sarah's life insurance money, carefully saved and invested, had been flowing out of our account and into Tyler's lifestyle like water through a broken dam. And my grandson thought he was self-made. I picked up my phone and did something I should have done years ago. I called Karen, my daughter, Tyler's mother. "Dad, hi, how are you feeling today?" Her voice carried that careful tone she'd used since Sarah died, like she was always checking to make sure I wasn't falling apart. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Listen, I need to ask you something about Tyler's college expenses. How are you and Mike managing the payments? I know money's been tight since the construction business slowed down." A pause, then a sound I didn't expect. Laughter. "Dad, we're not paying for Tyler's college. We told you years ago we couldn't afford it. Tyler said he'd gotten grants and scholarships to cover everything. He's been handling all his own finances since he started school. My hand tightened around the phone. Grants and scholarships? That's what he told us. Said he'd filled out applications and qualified for need-based aid because of Mike's income situation. We were so proud of him for being resourceful and independent. Independent, that word again. Karen, has Tyler ever asked you for money? Ever mentioned any financial problems? Never. In fact, he's always bragging about how well he's managing on his own. Just last month he took us out to dinner at that fancy steakhouse downtown. Said it was his treat because he was doing so well financially. My treat, with my money. After I hung up with Karen, I sat in the silence of my kitchen, processing the full scope of Tyler's deception. Not only was he taking my money without knowing it, but he'd been lying to his parents for 3 years about where it was coming from. He'd built his entire college identity on a foundation of lies, funded by the grandfather he was now too busy to talk to. I opened my laptop and navigated to Tyler's social media again. This time, I looked deeper, going back months and years. What I found there painted a picture that made my jaw clench with something harder than disappointment. Posts about his hustle mentality and entrepreneurial spirit. Photos of expensive meals with captions about investing in experiences. Videos of him giving advice to younger students about financial independence and making smart money moves. But it was the post from 2 months ago that really got to me. A long philosophical caption over a photo of Tyler sitting in what looked like an expensive coffee shop in Scottsdale. I see too many people my age still depending on their parents and grandparents for everything. That's not me. I believe in earning what you have, working for what you want, and never being a burden on family. Real men take care of themselves. That's the difference between boys and men. Boys take, men give. Real men take care of themselves. Boys take, men give. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. I scrolled through the comments on that post. Dozens of likes and replies from friends praising Tyler's maturity and wisdom. One comment from a girl named Jessica caught my attention. "This is exactly why I respect you so much, Tyler. You're nothing like these other college guys who are still on their parents' payroll." I clicked on Jessica's profile. Blonde, beautiful, from what looked like a wealthy family, based on the designer clothes and exotic vacation photos. In several recent pictures, she was with Tyler, always at expensive restaurants or events, the kind of places that cost more for one meal than I used to spend on groceries for a week. Tyler wasn't just lying to his parents about his finances. He was lying to his girlfriend, his friends, probably everyone he knew. He'd created an entire persona based on financial independence and self-reliance, all while living off his grandfather's retirement money. The grandfather, who was apparently too boring to spend 5 minutes talking to. I picked up my phone and scrolled through Tyler's contact information until I found his address. That apartment near campus that I'd been paying $1,500 a month for. I'd never actually seen it. Tyler had never invited me over, never given me a tour, never even mentioned much about where he lived. On impulse, I decided to take a drive. The apartment complex was in Tempe, about 20 minutes from my house in Phoenix, the kind of place that marketed itself to college students with more money than sense. Luxury amenities, a resort-style pool, granite countertops, and rent prices that would make most people's eyes water. I parked across the street and watched the complex for a while. Young people coming and going, most of them driving cars that cost more than my first house. This wasn't student housing. This was upscale living for kids whose parents had deep pockets, or in Tyler's case, whose grandfather had deep pockets and a generous heart. A red Mustang pulled into the parking lot, and I recognized it immediately. Tyler's car, the one I'd been making payments on for 18 months. He climbed out wearing clothes I didn't recognize. Designer jeans, expensive sneakers, a watch that caught the afternoon sun like it was made of real gold. He wasn't alone. The blonde from the social media photos was with him, along with two other young men I didn't recognize. They were all laughing about something, heading toward the apartment building with the easy confidence of people who'd never worried about where their next meal was coming from. I watched Tyler swipe a keycard at the building entrance, holding the door open for his friends with the casual chivalry of someone who felt completely at home in his expensive surroundings. These were his people, this was his world, and I was apparently so far outside of it that I didn't even deserve a phone call. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text message. Tyler's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he'd thought about our conversation yesterday. Maybe he'd realized he'd been harsh and wanted to make things right. I pulled over to read the message. "Hey, Grandpa, can you spot me $500? My laptop died and I need a new one for classes. Can you Venmo it to me? Thanks." No apology for hanging up on me. No acknowledgement that he'd been rude or hurtful. Just a request for money, sent with the casual expectation that I'd comply immediately, $500 for a laptop, while he was out having expensive lunches with friends, driving a car I was paying for, living in an apartment I was funding, attending a school I was sponsoring. I stared at the message for a long time, sitting in my truck on the side of the road while traffic flowed past me. 3 years of automatic transfers, $250,000, countless sacrifices I'd made to ensure Tyler had every opportunity I'd never had. And this was how he saw me. Not as a grandfather who loved him, not as a man who'd served his country and worked hard his entire life to provide for his family. I was just an ATM machine that occasionally made inconvenient phone calls. I typed back a simple response. "We'll talk about it later," but I knew we wouldn't talk about it later. In fact, Tyler and I were going to have a very different kind of conversation very soon. The kind of conversation that happens when the money stops flowing and reality comes knocking on your door. I drove home and spent the evening researching exactly how to cancel automatic bank transfers, stop credit card payments, and ensure that every penny of support I'd been providing would disappear as quietly as it had been given. Tyler thought he was too busy for his grandfather. He was about to discover just how much free time he'd have when he was truly as independent as he claimed to be. The next week, I did something I'd never done before in my 71 years. I became a detective, investigating my own grandson's life. What I discovered made me question everything I thought I knew about the boy I'd helped raise. It started with the laptop request. Instead of sending the $500, I decided to dig deeper into Tyler's actual financial situation. I called the bank and requested detailed statements for the credit card I'd been paying off each month, the one Tyler used for school expenses. The statements told a story that made my blood pressure spike. March alone, won $200 at high-end restaurants, $800 at a clothing store in Scottsdale, $450 at some place called VIP Bottle Service, and $600 at a jewelry store. This wasn't a college student buying textbooks and ramen noodles. This was someone living like a trust fund baby, but it was the jewelry store purchase that really caught my attention. $600 on March 15th, just 2 days before Tyler posted photos on social media of Jessica wearing what looked like a very expensive necklace. The caption read, "Spoiling my girl because she deserves the world. When you work hard, you can afford to treat the people you love right. When you work hard." Tyler was a full-time student who, as far as I knew, had never held a job in his life. I decided to visit the jewelry store. Desert Diamonds in Old Town Scottsdale was the kind of place where they offered you champagne while you browsed. The sales associate, a well-dressed woman in her 40s, remembered Tyler immediately. "Oh yes, the college boy with the expensive taste," she said with a knowing smile. "He comes in regularly, always paying cash, always very specific about what he wants. Last month he bought a beautiful tennis bracelet for his girlfriend." "Cash?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would sting. "Well, debit card. But he mentioned he'd been saving up from his internship at some tech company. Very mature young man, very responsible with money. Internship at a tech company, another lie to add to Tyler's growing collection. From there, I drove to Arizona State University. The registrar's office couldn't give me specific information about Tyler's grades due to privacy laws, but a helpful administrator let slip something that made my stomach drop. "I can't discuss individual student records," she said carefully, "but I can tell you that any student on academic probation receives multiple warnings and opportunities for academic counseling." Academic probation. My straight-A grandson, the one I'd been so proud of, was apparently failing college. That evening I did something that felt like a violation, but seemed necessary. I used the emergency contact information Tyler had given the apartment complex 3 years ago to access his account online. As the person responsible for rent payments, I technically had authorization to view the lease agreement and any related communications. What I found there shattered the last of my illusions about Tyler's character. 3 noise complaints in the past 6 months, warnings about unauthorized overnight guests, a formal notice about excessive partying that had resulted in property damage to the apartment below, and most damning of all, a recent email exchange between Tyler and the property management company. Tyler had written, "Look, my parents are loaded, and my grandfather is basically my personal bank account. Any damages or fines, just add them to the monthly rent. Money's not an issue for my family. Personal bank account." That's how he saw me. Not as a grandfather who loved him, not as a veteran who'd earned every dollar through decades of hard work, but as his personal bank account. I printed out every email, every bank statement, every piece of evidence of Tyler's deception and disrespect. Then I did what any good strategist would do. I planned my campaign, but first I needed to understand exactly how deep this betrayal went. I spent the next 3 days following Tyler's routine. Not stalking, just observing from a distance the life my money was funding. What I saw was a young man who had completely lost touch with reality. Monday, Tyler met Jessica for lunch at a restaurant where the cheapest entree cost $40. I watched from my truck as they laughed and toasted with wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Through the window, I could see Tyler gesturing animatedly, clearly telling some story that had Jessica hanging on every word. Tuesday, Tyler and 2 friends spent the afternoon at a luxury car dealership. Not just looking, actually test-driving vehicles that cost more than most people's annual salary. The salesman treated them seriously, probably because Tyler was dressed in clothes that screamed money. Wednesday, the most telling day of all. Tyler and Jessica went apartment hunting in Paradise Valley, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Arizona. I followed at a distance as they toured luxury condos with price tags that would make a doctor think twice. That evening, Tyler posted, on social media, "House hunting with my baby. Time to upgrade the lifestyle. When you're building an empire, you need a castle to match. Building an empire with my money." The final straw came Thursday morning when I received a call from Arizona State University's financial aid office. "Mr. Johnson, we're calling about Tyler Johnson's account. There seems to be some confusion about his financial aid status. According to our records, Tyler's family reported significant financial hardship on his aid applications, but recent activity suggests otherwise." My hands went cold. What kind of activity? Well, Tyler was recently seen driving a luxury vehicle to campus and has been posting on social media about expensive lifestyle choices. This is inconsistent with the need-based aid he's been receiving. Need-based aid. Tyler had been double-dipping, taking financial aid meant for truly struggling students while living off my retirement money. Sir, are you there? We need to verify Tyler's financial situation. If his family circumstances have improved significantly, he may need to repay aid he wasn't entitled to receive. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen, staring at the walls where Tyler's childhood artwork still hung. Crayon drawings of him and me fishing together, construction paper cards that said "World's Best Grandpa," photos from Little League games where I'd cheered louder than any parent in the stands. When had that sweet, grateful little boy turned into this lying, entitled stranger who saw his grandfather as nothing more than a financial resource? My phone buzzed with another text from Tyler. "Grandpa, still need that laptop money. Also, Jessica's birthday is coming up and I want to get her something special. Can you send an extra $800? I'll pay you back." Pay me back. Tyler had never paid me back for anything in his entire life. He'd never even acknowledged that I was the source of his comfortable lifestyle. I looked at that text for a long time, then I did something that felt both terrifying and liberating. I typed back, "Tyler, I think it's time we had a serious conversation about your finances." His response came immediately. "What about them? Everything's fine on my end." "Everything's fine on your end because I've been paying for everything for 3 years. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the $243,000 I've transferred from my retirement account to support your college lifestyle. I'm talking about the apartment rent, the car payment, the credit card bills, all of it." This time the pause was longer. When Tyler finally responded, his message made my jaw clench. "Okay, so you've been helping out. That's what grandparents do. What's your point? That's what grandparents do. No gratitude, no acknowledgement of the magnitude of my sacrifice. No recognition that I'd spent Sarah's life insurance money, the nest egg we'd saved for our golden years, to fund his elaborate deception. Just an entitled expectation that, of course, his grandfather would bankroll his entire lifestyle while he lied to everyone about being self-made." I typed back, "My point is that grandparents who help out deserve basic respect and courtesy, like a phone call once in a while. Grandpa, you're being dramatic. I've been busy with school and stuff. It's not personal." Not personal. $250,000 wasn't personal. I turned off my phone and walked to my desk, where I kept the folder of bank statements and printed emails. Evidence of 3 years of deception, entitlement, and complete disregard for the grandfather who'd made Tyler's fantasy life possible. Tomorrow, Tyler was going to learn what busy really meant when you didn't have a personal bank account disguised as a loving grandfather. Tomorrow, the money flow would stop and the lesson would begin. What do you think about Tyler's behavior so far? Would you have handled this situation differently? Let me know in the comments below, because this story is just getting started. Friday morning, I woke up with the kind of determination I hadn't felt since my army days. The kind of focused resolve that comes when you know exactly what needs to be done, and you're the only one who can do it. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. By the time the sun was fully up over the Phoenix Mountains, I'd accomplished something that would have taken Tyler months to figure out, if he ever bothered to look at his actual financial situation. I cancelled everything. Every automatic payment, every transfer, every safety net I'd quietly built around my ungrateful grandson's life. The apartment rent that was due in 5 days. Cancelled. The car payment that kept that red Mustang in his driveway. Cancelled. The credit card that funded his expensive lifestyle. Payment stopped. The monthly allowance that he spent on jewelry for girlfriends. Gone. Even the auto pay for his car insurance. Tyler was about to discover what it felt like to be truly independent, but I wasn't cruel about it. I didn't want him to get hurt or stranded somewhere dangerous. So I left him a grace period. Enough time for him to figure out his situation and make other arrangements. The beauty of it was that Tyler, who never paid attention to anything financial, wouldn't realize what was happening until it was too late to fix things easily. I also did something else that morning. I called my old friend Frank Morrison, who ran a private investigation business. Frank and I had served together in Vietnam, and he owed me a favor from when I'd helped him out during his own family crisis 5 years ago. "Will, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" "Frank, I need someone to document some activities. Legally, nothing invasive. Just public behavior that someone might want to verify later." 2 hours later, Frank's son Michael, a professional photographer, was positioned discreetly near Tyler's apartment complex with a telephoto lens. If Tyler was going to live like a rich playboy on his grandfather's dime, at least there would be a record of it. The photos that came back that evening were exactly what I expected, and somehow still managed to disappoint me. Tyler and Jessica, leaving their expensive apartment complex at 2 p.m., both dressed in designer clothes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Tyler pulling up to a luxury spa in Scottsdale, where the cheapest service was a $100 facial. Tyler and Jessica at an upscale shopping center, walking out of stores with bags from Gucci, Louis Vuitton, and other brands I recognized from commercials but had never imagined my grandson could afford. Tyler treating a group of friends to dinner at a steakhouse where the wine list started at $60 a bottle. Every photo showed a young man living, completely without financial awareness or responsibility. Someone who'd never had to check a bank balance, never had to choose between paying rent and eating decent food, never had to understand that money has to come from somewhere. But the photo that really got to me was the last one of the day. Tyler and Jessica standing outside a high-end jewelry store, Tyler on one knee in the parking lot, presenting what looked like an engagement ring to his stunned girlfriend. He was proposing. With money I'd provided, buying a ring I'd unknowingly funded, promising a future he couldn't afford without his grandfather's continued support. The grandfather he was too busy to spend 5 minutes talking to. My phone rang around 9 p.m. Tyler's. Name on the screen. "Grandpa, hey, listen, I need to ask you something important. No apology for our last conversation. No acknowledgement that he'd been dismissive and rude. Just straight to whatever he needed." "I'm listening, Tyler." "Jessica and I got engaged today," I proposed, and she said yes. "We're thinking about a summer wedding, maybe something really nice, you know. Anyway, I was hoping you could help us out with some of the expenses." "Wedding? Costs are crazy these days." I sat in my recliner, looking at Sarah's photo on the side table, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Tyler was asking me to fund his wedding to a girl he'd been impressing with my money, planning a future. He couldn't afford, all while treating me like an ATM machine that occasionally made inconvenient requests for conversation. "Congratulations, Tyler, that's wonderful news. Tell me about Jessica. How long have you two been together?" "About 8 months. She's amazing, Grandpa. Really smart, comes from a good family. Her dad owns a chain of car dealerships, so they understand quality and success. Based on Tyler's fake lifestyle, funded by his grandfather's retirement money. That sounds lovely, and you feel ready for marriage, financially prepared to support a wife." A pause. "Well, yeah. I mean, I've been doing pretty well for myself. Independent, you know, making smart financial decisions. Jessica respects that about me. Making smart financial decisions." The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. "Tyler, what smart financial decisions are you referring to? You're a college student. Where exactly is your income coming from?" Another pause, longer this time. "Grandpa, I don't really want to get into all the details. Let's just say I've been resourceful and leave it at that." The point is, I'm responsible enough to get married, but weddings are expensive, and I could really use family support. Family support from the family member he was too busy to talk to unless he needed money. I see. And Jessica's family? Are they contributing to the wedding expenses? Her dad's being a little weird about it. He keeps asking questions about my family's financial situation, wants to meet my parents and grandparents. You know how older people are. But I told him we're totally set, very stable situation. Tyler had told his future father-in-law that our family was financially stable, presumably meaning that I would continue funding his lifestyle indefinitely. He'd made promises about our family's wealth without consulting me, without even acknowledging that I was the source of his apparent prosperity. Tyler, have you told Jessica about our arrangement, about the financial support I've been providing? What arrangement? Grandpa, you're making it sound like some kind of business deal. You've helped me out sometimes and I appreciate it, but I don't really see why Jessica needs to know family financial details. Helped him out sometimes. $243,000 over 3 years was helping out sometimes. I think Jessica deserves to know the truth about your financial situation before she marries you, don't you? My financial situation is fine, Grandpa. Look, can we not make this complicated? I just need to know if you're going to help with wedding costs or not. It's a simple question. A simple question. After 3 years of never asking how I was doing, never visiting unless he needed something, never showing interest in my life or Sarah's memory or anything beyond what I could provide financially. Tyler, let me ask you something. When's the last time you called me just to talk? Not to ask for money, not because you needed something, just to check on your grandfather. Silence, long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Grandpa, I don't really see what that has to do with wedding planning. It has everything to do with it, son. Family relationships are built on more than financial transactions. Okay? Look, I know I've been busy with school and everything. Maybe I haven't called as much as I should have, but that doesn't mean I don't care about you. Too busy for a 5-minute phone call, but not too busy to spend my money on engagement rings and designer clothes. Tyler, I think it's time you learn to manage your own financial situation. Figure out your own way to pay for your wedding, your lifestyle, your future. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're 20 years old and it's time to be as independent as you claim to be. Grandpa, are you saying you won't help with the wedding? Because I've already started making plans based on what, Tyler? Based on the assumption that I'd automatically pay for whatever you wanted, without you even asking politely or treating me with basic respect. Another long pause. When Tyler spoke again, his voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Grandpa, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but you're being really unfair. I've never asked you for anything unreasonable. Never asked for anything unreasonable. $250,000 over 3 years, and Tyler thought that was perfectly reasonable to expect from a grandfather he was too busy to call. Tyler, I want you to think about something. Think about what kind of man you want to be when you marry Jessica. Think about whether you want to build your marriage on honesty or on lies about where your money comes from. I haven't lied about anything. You told Jessica you're financially independent and self-made. You told her parents our family is wealthy and stable. You've been living a lifestyle funded entirely by my retirement money while claiming to be resourceful and successful. On your own. What would you call that? The silence stretched so long, I thought he might have hung up. Grandpa, we'll talk about this later when you're feeling more reasonable. The line went dead. I sat in my recliner, looking at the phone, feeling something that wasn't quite sadness and wasn't quite anger. It was more like the satisfaction of a teacher who'd just given a student exactly the lesson they needed, even if they didn't realize it yet. Tyler would call back soon enough. Probably when the first payment got declined, or when the apartment complex started asking questions about overdue rent, or when his credit card stopped working at his next expensive dinner. He'd call back, but by then he'd be calling a grandfather who expected respect along with requests. He'd be talking to a man who taught him the difference between being entitled to something and earning it. I hope you're enjoying this story so far. Thank you for sticking with me through Tyler's journey, and I promise you, the best is yet to come. The next 2 weeks passed quietly, and I found myself checking my phone more often than I cared to admit. Not because I was hoping Tyler would call, I knew he would eventually, but because I was curious about how long it would take for reality to catch up with his fantasy. The answer came on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. My phone rang with Tyler's, a panicked voice on the other end. No greeting, no pleasantries, just immediate crisis mode. Grandpa, something's wrong with my accounts. My rent payment got declined, my car payment didn't go through, and my credit card was declined at dinner last night. I think someone might have hacked into our family's banking system. Our family's banking system. Even in crisis, Tyler couldn't acknowledge that it was my money, my account, my choice to support him. That sounds concerning, Tyler. Have you checked with your bank about the problem? I tried, but they're saying there's no issue on their end. They're saying the automatic transfers from your account were cancelled, but that doesn't make sense, right? You wouldn't cancel them without telling me. The moment of truth. Tyler still believed that his lifestyle was some kind of guaranteed entitlement, something that would flow forever, without question or gratitude. Actually, Tyler, I did cancel them about 2 weeks ago. Silence. Complete stunned silence that stretched so long I wondered if he'd dropped the phone. You... what? Why would you do that? Because you told me you were too busy for me. Because in 3 years of receiving $250,000 from my retirement account, you've never once asked how I'm doing. Never visited unless you needed something. Never shown any interest in maintaining a relationship with your grandfather. Grandpa. That's not... I've been busy with school and... Tyler, you've been failing school. I know about the academic probation. I know about the lies you've told your parents about scholarships and grants. I know about the need-based financial aid you've been receiving while living like a trust fund. Baby on my money. Another long pause. When Tyler spoke again, his voice had changed. Gone was the casual confidence, replaced by something closer to panic. How do you know about all that? Because unlike you, I pay attention to what's happening in our family. I've been watching, Tyler. I've seen the lifestyle you've been living, the lies you've been telling, the complete lack of gratitude or respect you've shown for the man who's been funding your entire college experience. Grandpa, look, maybe I haven't been the best at staying in touch, but that doesn't mean you should just cut me off without warning. I have responsibilities now. Jessica and I are engaged. We have plans. Responsibilities. Tyler was lecturing me about responsibilities while asking me to fund his irresponsible lifestyle. What responsibilities are those, Tyler? You're failing college, lying to your fiancé about your finances, and treating your grandfather like an ATM machine. What exactly are you taking responsibility for? That's not fair. I never asked you to pay for everything. You never asked because you never knew. You thought your parents were somehow managing to pay $40,000 a year for your education while your father's construction business was barely staying afloat. You never questioned where the money was coming from because you didn't want to know. You wanted to believe you deserved it all without having to be grateful to anyone. I could hear Tyler's breathing on the other end, quick and shallow. The reality of his situation was starting to sink in. Grandpa, I can't just stop paying rent. I'll get evicted. And my car payment is due. And Jessica's expecting this wedding. Then I suggest you figure out how to pay for those things yourself. Get a job, like most college students do. Apply for legitimate financial aid based on honest information. Learn what it means to actually be independent instead of just claiming to be a job. Grandpa, I'm a full-time student. I don't have time for a job. You had time to spend 3 hours at a luxury spa last week. You had time to go shopping for designer clothes and expensive jewelry. You had time for elaborate dinner parties and weekend trips, but you don't have time for the kind of work that would actually fund that lifestyle. You've been watching me. I've been documenting the lifestyle my money was funding. The lifestyle you've been lying about to everyone, including your fiancé. Tyler's voice took on a desperate edge. Grandpa, please. I know I messed up. I should have called more, should have been more appreciative. But you can't just cut me off like this. What am I supposed to tell Jessica? What am I supposed to tell her parents? You're supposed to tell them the truth, Tyler. Tell them you're not financially independent. Tell them your grandfather has been supporting you for 3 years while you lied about being self-made. Tell them the expensive lifestyle they've been impressed by was funded by a 71-year-old veteran's retirement money. I can't tell them that. Jessica's father already thinks I'm not good enough for her. If he finds out I've been lying about my financial situation, then maybe you should have thought about that before you built your entire relationship on deception. The silence that followed was different. I could almost hear Tyler's mind racing, trying to find some angle, some way to manipulate the situation back in his favor. Grandpa, what if I promise to do better? What if I start calling you regularly, visiting more often? Can't we work something out? Tyler, you're missing the point. This isn't about making deals or negotiating terms. This is about learning that respect and gratitude can't be bought retroactively. You can't spend 3 years treating someone like an inconvenience and then promise to do better when the money stops flowing. But I do respect you. I do appreciate everything you've done. No, Tyler, you don't. If you respected me, you wouldn't have hung up on me when I called just to hear your voice. If you appreciated what I'd done, you wouldn't have called me your personal bank account in emails to your apartment complex. If you cared about our relationship, you wouldn't have lied to everyone about being self-made while spending my money. I heard Tyler's voice crack slightly. You saw that email? I saw everything, Tyler. The social media posts about being independent, the advice you gave other students about not depending on family, the lies you told Jessica about your financial situation, the way you've been living like a wealthy young man while never acknowledging the grandfather who made it all possible. Grandpa, I'm sorry, I really am. I didn't realize. You didn't realize because you didn't want to realize. You wanted to believe you deserved all of this without having to earn it or be grateful for it. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, more like the little boy I remembered. What happens now? Am I really on my own? Tyler, you've been claiming to be on your own for 3 years. Now you have the opportunity to prove it. But Grandpa, I don't know how to. I've never had to actually manage money or pay bills. Oh, then you'll learn. The same way millions of other young people learn. The same way I learned when I was 18 and enlisted in the army because my family couldn't afford to send me to college. That's different. You didn't have the opportunities I have. The opportunities you have were paid for by the grandfather you were too busy to talk to. And now you'll discover what opportunities you can create for yourself. Another long pause. Grandpa, please, I'm begging you, just give me another chance. I'll do anything. Tyler, I'm not trying to punish you. I'm trying to teach you something that apparently no one else ever has. Money has to come from somewhere. Respect has to be earned. Gratitude has to be genuine. And relationships have to be built on more than financial transactions. I understand that now. I swear I do. No, Tyler, you understand that your lifestyle is in jeopardy. That's not the same thing as understanding what you've done wrong. I heard him sniffle on the other end. For the first time in our conversation, Tyler sounded like he might actually be absorbing the magnitude of his situation. Grandpa, what if I lose everything? What if Jessica leaves me? What if I have to drop out of school? Then you'll learn what it means to build something real instead of living in a fantasy funded by someone else's sacrifices. I don't know how to do that. Then it's time you learned. The same way every other young person learns, through work, through mistakes, through earning what you have, instead of expecting it to be given to you. The call ended with Tyler saying he needed time to think. I sat in my kitchen afterward, feeling something I hadn't expected, not satisfaction or vindication, but genuine sadness for the boy who'd been so spoiled by good intentions that he'd lost sight of basic human decency. But I also felt something else. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this lesson would teach Tyler something valuable about character, about gratitude, about what it really means to be a man. The next few days would tell me whether I was right. If you're still watching this video, hit that subscribe button now, because Tyler's story is about to take a turn that will surprise you as much as it surprised me. 4 days passed without a word from Tyler, and I found myself settling into a routine I hadn't experienced in 3 years, checking my bank balance and seeing the same number from the previous day. No mysterious transfers, no unexpected charges, just my retirement money sitting exactly where I'd left it. It was oddly peaceful. On Friday afternoon, my daughter Karen called. "Dad, I just got the strangest call from Tyler. He's asking if Mike and I can help him with his rent payment. He says there's been some kind of banking error and his usual financial aid got delayed." Banking error, financial aid delayed. Even in crisis, Tyler was still lying. "What did you tell him?" I told him the truth, that we don't have $1,500 sitting around for emergency apartment rent. Mike's construction business is finally getting back on track, but we're still catching up from the lean years. Tyler seemed shocked that we couldn't just write him a check. Shocked, because Tyler had lived for 3 years believing his parents somehow had unlimited resources to fund his lifestyle. "Karen, did Tyler ever tell you where his money was actually coming from?" "What do you mean? You said he had grants and scholarships." "Tyler said he had grants and scholarships. I never confirmed that because I knew it wasn't true." A pause. "Dad, what are you telling me?" "I'm telling you that for 3 years I've been transferring almost $7,000 a month from my retirement account to cover Tyler's college expenses, tuition, rent, car payment, credit cards, spending money, everything." The silence on the other end stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Dad, did you just say $7,000 a month?" $6,750 to be exact, for 36 months. Total cost, $243,000. Oh my God. "Dad, that's almost $250,000. That's your and Mum's life insurance money. That's your retirement. That's what I've been thinking about lately." "And Tyler never knew it was coming from you?" "Tyler never asked where it was coming from. He was happy to live like a wealthy young man without questioning the source of his wealth." Karen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a tone I'd rarely heard from my usually diplomatic daughter. Anger. "Dad, Tyler called me yesterday complaining about how you'd been unreasonable about wedding expenses. He made it sound like you were being cheap about helping with normal family celebrations. Wedding expenses for a wedding he's planning with money I provided to a girl he's been lying to about his financial situation. He's engaged? To Jessica? That girl from the photos? Engaged and planning a summer wedding that he expected me to fund, apparently without consultation or gratitude. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. How much of your retirement money is left after 3 years of supporting Tyler?" The question I'd been avoiding asking myself directly. I'd been so focused on the monthly transfers that I hadn't calculated the impact on my overall financial security. Enough to live comfortably if I'm careful, not enough to maintain the level of support I've been providing Tyler while also handling my own expenses and potential healthcare costs. You've been jeopardizing your own financial security to fund Tyler's college lifestyle. I've been investing in my grandson's education and future, or at least that's what I thought I was doing. Karen was quiet again. Then, "Dad, Tyler's grades. You said something about academic probation. How bad is it? Bad enough that the university called me about inconsistencies in his financial aid applications. Apparently, Tyler's been receiving need-based aid while living a lifestyle that suggests significant family wealth. So he's been taking money from you and taking financial aid meant for actually struggling students? That appears to be the case. Dad, I'm so sorry. Mike and I had no idea any of this was happening. We thought Tyler was being responsible and independent. We were actually proud of him for managing everything on his own. Tyler wanted everyone to believe he was independent and self-made. It was easier for him to maintain that fiction than to acknowledge the support he was receiving or show gratitude for it. What are you going to do now? I've stopped all the payments. Tyler is going to learn what it actually means to be independent. Good. The firmness in Karen's voice surprised me. Dad, I love Tyler, but this is unacceptable. The lying, the ingratitude, the way he's been treating you, none of that is okay. I hope this teaches him something about character and responsibility. And if it doesn't, if he just finds some other way to avoid facing reality, then at least I'll know I tried to teach him the right lesson instead of continuing to enable the wrong behavior. After Karen and I hung up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I hadn't realized was there. For 3 years, I'd been carrying the secret of Tyler's support alone, wondering if I was being too generous or not generous enough, questioning whether I was helping or hurting him by providing so much. Now, with the truth out in the open, I could see the situation clearly. I hadn't been helping Tyler. I'd been enabling him to avoid growing up. That evening, my phone rang again. Tyler's name on the screen, but this time when I answered, I could hear background noise that suggested he wasn't in his luxury apartment. Grandpa, I'm at a coffee shop near campus. I can't really talk long because my phone's about to die and I don't have money for food today. The dramatic flair was typical Tyler, but something in his voice suggested this wasn't entirely performance. What happened to your meal plan? I had to cancel it to try to cover part of my rent payment, and before you ask, yes, I got a job. I'm working at a restaurant downtown, serving tables. This was new. In 3 years of college, Tyler had never mentioned working anywhere. How's that going? It's humbling. I made $38 in tips last night after working a 6-hour shift. Grandpa, I had no idea how hard it was to actually earn money. Most people learn that gradually, starting with small jobs as teenagers. You're getting a compressed education in financial reality. I talked to Jessica about our situation, about the money coming from you, about my grades, about everything. How did she take it? A long pause. She broke up with me. Her father had been asking questions about my family's financial situation because he wanted to discuss wedding expenses and future planning. When Jessica told him the truth about where my money had been coming from and that it was gone, he wasn't pleased. I'm sorry, Tyler, that must have been difficult. The thing is, Grandpa, I keep thinking about what you said, about building relationships on honesty versus deception. Jessica didn't just break up with me because the money was gone. She broke up with me because I'd been lying to her for 8 months about who I really was. This was the first thing Tyler had said in 3 years that suggested actual self-reflection rather than self-pity. What are you going to do now? I don't know. I'm behind on rent. My car got repossessed yesterday, and I'm probably going to have to move back home with Mom and Dad. I've never felt so lost. Tyler, can I ask you something? Sure. In all of this, losing the apartment, losing the car, losing Jessica, what bothers you the most? He was quiet for a long time. Honestly, what bothers me most is realizing that I've been a terrible grandson. To the person who's done more for me than anyone else in my life. Something in my chest loosened at those words. It took me losing everything to realize that I'd never actually thanked you. Not really. I'd never asked about your life, or Mom's memory, or how you were doing after 3 years of living alone. I'd never visited just to spend time with you. I'd never treated you like family. I'd treated you like a service provider. Tyler, no. Grandpa, let me finish. I called you that day because I was bored and thought maybe you could entertain me for a few minutes. When you wanted to have an actual conversation, I got annoyed because you were interfering with my plans. I hung up on you because I saw you as an inconvenience. Tyler's voice was getting thick with emotion. I spent your money for 3 years while posting on social media about being independent and self-made. I gave advice to other students about not depending on family while literally depending on you for everything. I planned a wedding with money you provided while never even introducing you to my fiancé. Tyler, I know you didn't understand the full situation. That's just it, Grandpa. I didn't want to understand. Understanding would have meant acknowledging that I owed my entire lifestyle to someone else's generosity. It would have meant being grateful instead of entitled. It would have meant treating you with respect instead of taking you for granted. For the first time in our conversation, Tyler sounded like the thoughtful young man I'd always hoped he could become. What happens now? I asked. Now I figure out how to earn back your respect, if that's even possible, and I figure out how to become the kind of man who deserves the grandfather I've been blessed with. Tyler, you don't have to earn back my respect. You never lost my love. But you do need to learn how to live with integrity and gratitude. I'm learning, Grandpa. It's hard, and I'm scared, but I'm learning. After we hung up, I sat in my recliner, looking at Sarah's photo and feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope that Tyler might actually grow from this experience instead of just being damaged by it. The next day would bring news that would test that hope in ways I never expected. Saturday morning brought a call I wasn't expecting, from Jessica herself. Mr. Johnson, this is Jessica Palmer, Tyler's, his ex-fiancée. I hope you don't mind me calling. Tyler gave me your number a while back, and I felt like I needed to speak with you directly. Her voice was polite but strained, the careful in tone of someone navigating an uncomfortable situation. Of course, Jessica. Tyler mentioned that you two had talked about everything. I'm sorry things didn't work out the way you'd planned. Mr. Johnson, I want you to know that I didn't break up with Tyler just because of the money situation. I mean, the lying was a problem. But what really bothered me was how he talked about you. This wasn't what I'd expected to hear. What do you mean? When I asked him why he'd never mentioned that you were supporting him, Tyler said it was because he was embarrassed by you. He said you were just some old veteran who didn't understand modern life, and he didn't want me to think his family was, his word was, unsophisticated. The words hit me harder than I'd expected. After everything I'd done for Tyler, he was embarrassed by me. He told me you lived in some run-down house in a bad neighborhood, and that you were always calling him asking for attention because you were lonely and bored. He made it sound like you were this needy old man who didn't have anything better to do than bother him. Each revelation felt like a physical blow. Not just that Tyler had lied about our financial arrangement, but that he'd deliberately painted me as someone pathetic and embarrassing. Jessica, I appreciate you telling me this, but you didn't have to. Yes, I did, Mr. Johnson, because after Tyler told me the truth about where his money was coming from, I did some research. I looked up your name online, and I found out about your military service, your business, your reputation in the community. I found out that you're not some lonely old man bothering your grandson. You're a decorated veteran who built a successful life and chose to invest in Tyler's future. She paused, and I could hear her voice getting emotional. Mr. Johnson, my own grandfather was a Korean War veteran. He passed away 2 years ago. I would have given anything to have more time with him, more conversations, more opportunities to learn from his experiences. And Tyler had that gift right in front of him, and he threw it away because he was embarrassed. Jessica, Tyler's young. Sometimes young people need time to understand what's really valuable in life. Maybe, but I can't be with someone who treats family that way. My father always taught me that you can judge a person's character by how they treat the people who've helped them the most. Tyler failed that test completely. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling a mixture of sadness and clarity. Tyler hadn't just taken my money for granted. He'd been actively ashamed of the grandfather who'd provided it. The boy I'd sacrificed, for worried about and loved unconditionally, had described me to his girlfriend as an embarrassment. But Jessica's call had also given me something unexpected. Perspective from someone Tyler's age who understood the value of grandparent relationships. My phone rang again an hour later. This time it was Tyler, and his voice sounded different, smaller, more uncertain. "Grandpa, did Jessica call you?" "She did." "I suppose she told you what I said about you, about being embarrassed." "She mentioned it." Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "Grandpa, I don't know how to explain why I said those things. I was trying to impress her, trying to make myself sound more sophisticated and independent. But that's not an excuse for what I said about you." "Tyler, were you really embarrassed by me?" Another pause. "Honestly, yes. And I hate myself for that now." The admission stung, but I appreciated his honesty. "Why were you embarrassed?" "Because you're not flashy or trendy. Because you live simply and talk about things like service and responsibility instead of money and status. Because all of Jessica's friends have grandparents who travel to Europe and drive luxury cars and talk about their stock portfolios. And I'm just an old veteran in Phoenix who drives a truck and shops at Walmart. You are an old veteran who served his country with honor, built a business from nothing, and sacrificed his retirement security to give his grandson opportunities he never had. But I was too immature and shallow to see the difference." Something in Tyler's voice suggested this wasn't just rehearsed contrition. "Tyler, what's changed? Why are you seeing things differently now?" "Because I've spent the last week working in a restaurant, getting yelled at by customers and learning what it means to actually earn minimum wage. And every night when I go home to Mom and Dad's house, I see the disappointment in their eyes when they realize how badly I've messed up my life." "What do your parents think about everything that's happened?" Mom cried when I told her how much money you'd spent on me. Not because you'd spent it, but because I'd never acknowledged it or been grateful for it. Dad was angry. He said he'd raised me better than that, and he was right." Tyler's voice cracked slightly. "Grandpa, I've lost my apartment, my car, my fiancé, my fake friends who only hung around because I was buying expensive dinners. But the worst thing is realizing that I lost something much more valuable years ago when I stopped seeing you as my grandfather and started seeing you as just a source of money." "You haven't lost me, Tyler. Haven't I? If I were you, I don't think I could forgive what I've done." I thought about that question seriously. Could I forgive Tyler? Did I want to forgive him? Tyler, forgiveness isn't about whether you deserve. It's about whether holding on to anger serves any purpose. Does it serve a purpose, I mean? No, son, it doesn't. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It means moving forward with honesty and respect. What would that look like? It would look like you learning to live within your means, finishing school through your own efforts, and building a relationship with me that's based on genuine care rather than financial dependence. And if I can't do that, if I've damaged things too badly, then you'll have learned an expensive lesson about the value of family relationships." Tyler was quiet for a moment. "Grandpa, can I ask you for one more thing? Not money, but just advice." "Of course. How do I rebuild my life from here? I'm 20 years old. I'm behind in school. I have no savings, no credit, no job skills. I feel like I'm starting from zero, but with the added weight of knowing how badly I've screwed everything up." It was the first time Tyler had asked me for guidance instead of money. "Tyler, most people your age are starting from zero. The difference is that you've had a preview of what financial irresponsibility looks like. That's actually an advantage if you learn from it. How is it an advantage? Because you now understand the consequences of your choices in a way that most young people don't. You've seen what happens when you live beyond your means, when you take relationships for granted, when you build your identity on lies. So, what do I do with that knowledge? You use it to make better choices going forward. You work hard, save money, treat people with respect, and build something real instead of something fake. What if it takes years to rebuild what I've lost? Then it takes years. Tyler, I spent 4 years in the military and 30 years building my business before I had the financial security to help you the way I did. Good things take time. Grandpa, do you think there's any chance that someday you might be proud of me again? The question broke something open in my chest. Tyler, I've never stopped being proud of the potential I see in you. I've been disappointed in your choices, but I've never stopped believing you could become the man I know you're capable of being. Even after everything I've done, especially after everything you've done, because now you have the chance to prove that you can learn, grow, and change. That's not a small thing, son. When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine hope for Tyler's future. Not because his problems were solved, but because for the first time he seemed to understand what the real problems were. The next week would test whether that understanding could translate into action. The following Tuesday, I received a call that surprised me more than anything that had happened in this entire situation. It was from Frank Morrison, my old army buddy, who'd been helping document Tyler's activities. Will, I think you need to see something. My son Mike has been following up on your grandson's situation, and he discovered something at the university that you should know about. An hour later, Frank was sitting in my kitchen with a manila folder that looked remarkably similar to the ones I'd been keeping about Tyler's financial deceptions. Will, Tyler's been busier than either of us realized. Mike talked to some students at ASU, and your grandson has apparently been running a side business that you might find interesting. Frank opened the folder and pulled out printed social media posts, screenshots of text conversations, and what looked like financial records. Tyler's been tutoring other students for money, but not just regular tutoring. He's been writing papers for them, taking online tests, basically doing their coursework for them. I stared at the documents. Academic fraud gets worse. He's been charging premium prices because he markets himself as this successful, financially independent student who knows how to work the system. Kids have been paying him hundreds of dollars per assignment because they think he's this business genius who's figured out how to make college profitable. Frank spread out more papers. Screenshots of Tyler advertising his services. Learn from someone who's mastered the game. I live in luxury while maintaining perfect grades. Let me show you how to work smarter, not harder. Perfect grades. According to these records Mike obtained, Tyler's been selling his services while he was on academic probation. He's been taking money from struggling students while failing his own classes. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't just financial irresponsibility or ingratitude. This was deliberate fraud, taking advantage of other people's desperation while living a lie. Frank, how much money are we talking about? Based on the conversations Mike documented, probably $15,000 to $20,000 over the past year and a half, tax-free cash that Tyler never reported to the financial aid office. So while I'd been sending Tyler nearly $7,000 a month, he'd also been generating significant income through academic fraud, income that should have disqualified him from the need-based aid he'd been receiving. There's more, Will. Mike talked to one kid who paid Tyler $800 to write a final paper for a business ethics class. Business ethics. The irony was so thick, it was almost funny. This kid, his name's David. He's a first-generation college student whose parents are working 2 jobs each to help him stay in school. He was struggling with the coursework and desperate not to lose his scholarship. Tyler convinced him that cheating was just playing the game smart and that everyone successful does it. Frank pulled out one more document. David got caught. The professor recognized Tyler's writing style because Tyler had submitted a similar paper in the same class the previous semester. David's facing expulsion, loss of his scholarship, and has to explain to his parents why their sacrifices were wasted. I stared at the documents, feeling something that went beyond disappointment into genuine anger. Tyler hadn't just been ungrateful or irresponsible. He'd been actively harming other people while lecturing them about success and independence. Frank, is there anything else? Mike found evidence of at least 12 other students who paid Tyler for various forms of academic fraud. Most of them are kids from working-class families who couldn't afford to lose their financial aid. And Tyler was taking their money while living off my retirement account and claiming to be self-made. That about sums it up. I thanked Frank and spent the rest of the day processing this new information. Tyler's deception had been even more extensive than I'd realized. He hadn't just been living a lie, he'd been selling that lie to other people and profiting from their desperation. That evening, Tyler called with what sounded like good news. "Grandpa, I have some updates. I've been working double shifts at the restaurant, and I managed to save enough money to pay this month's rent at Mom and Dad's house. They're letting me stay here while I figure things out, but they want me to contribute to household expenses. That sounds reasonable and responsible. And I've been meeting with an academic advisor about getting off probation and finishing my degree. It's going to take extra time and effort, but I think I can do it." I'm glad to hear that, Tyler. There's something else. I've been thinking about what you said, about building something real instead of something fake. I want to start over completely. New approach to school, new relationship with money, new relationship with family. This would have been encouraging if I hadn't spent the afternoon learning about Tyler's academic fraud business. Tyler, I need to ask you about something. Have you been earning money through tutoring other students? A pause. Yes, I have been doing some tutoring. Why? What kind of tutoring? Another pause, longer this time. Grandpa, where is this coming from? Tyler, I need you to be completely honest with me. What kind of tutoring have you been doing? Silence. Long enough that I knew Tyler was calculating how much I might know and how much he could get away with hiding. Tyler, I know about the academic fraud. I know about the students you've been charging to write their papers and take their tests. I know about David, who got expelled because of work you did for him. The silence stretched even longer. Grandpa, I can explain. I'm listening. It started small, just helping a few friends with homework. But then I realized I could make money at it, and I needed the income to maintain my lifestyle. So you started charging struggling students hundreds of dollars to cheat for them. It wasn't. I didn't see it as cheating exactly. I was providing a service. These kids were overwhelmed and I was helping them manage their coursework. Tyler, you were committing academic fraud while failing your own classes. You were taking money from students who couldn't afford to lose their financial aid while you were fraudulently receiving aid yourself. Grandpa, it's not as bad as it sounds. Tyler, a student named David, lost his scholarship and got expelled because of work you sold him. His parents worked 2 jobs to help him stay in school, and now their sacrifices are wasted because you convinced him that cheating was smart business. Silence. How many students, Tyler? How many people did you take advantage of while preaching? About independence and self-reliance? I don't know. Maybe 12 or 15 over the past year and a half. 15 students who trusted you and ended up compromising their academic integrity because you needed money to maintain a lifestyle funded by your grandfather's retirement account. Grandpa, I know it sounds bad when you put it like that. How else should I put it, Tyler? You were living off my money while generating unreported income through academic fraud, while receiving financial aid you weren't entitled to, while lecturing other students about independence and responsibility. I was desperate. I needed money to keep up appearances with Jessica and her friends. So you solved your financial desperation by taking advantage of other people's desperation. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. Grandpa, what are you going to do with this information? I'm going to let you decide what to do with it. This is your chance to show me whether you've actually learned anything about integrity and responsibility, or whether you're just going to keep finding new ways to avoid facing consequences. What do you mean? I mean you need to contact every student you defrauded and make it right. You need to report your income to the Financial Aid Office and the IRS. You need to face whatever academic consequences your actions deserve. Grandpa, if I do that, I'll probably get expelled. I'll lose any chance of finishing college. And if you don't do it, you'll continue being the kind of person who profits from other people's desperation while claiming to be honorable. That's not fair. You're asking me to destroy my future. Tyler, your future was already destroyed the moment you decided that lying and cheating were acceptable ways to solve your problems. I'm asking you to rebuild it on a foundation of honesty, instead of continuing to build it on lies. The conversation ended with Tyler saying he needed time to think. I hung up feeling like I was watching a young man stand at a crossroads, with one path leading toward genuine redemption and the other leading toward a life of increasingly elaborate deceptions. Tomorrow would reveal which path Tyler would choose, and whether the lessons of the past month had actually changed him or just taught him to be more careful about his lies. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about David, the first-generation college student who'd lost everything because Tyler had convinced him that cheating was just playing the game smart. I thought about the other students, 15 young people who'd trusted Tyler's facade of success and ended up compromising their integrity. At 2 a.m., I made a decision that surprised even me. I got up, walked to my desk, and wrote a check for $25,000, enough to cover David's tuition and expenses for the coming semester. If Tyler wouldn't make things right, maybe I could help fix at least one of the problems he'd created. But first, Tyler needed to make his choice. The next morning, Tyler called earlier than usual. His voice sounded different, steadier, more resolved. Grandpa, I've been up all night thinking about what you said, about David and the other students, about the choice between rebuilding on honesty or continuing to build on lies. And what did you decide? I'm going to contact everyone, all 15 students I took money from. I'm going to tell them the truth about my situation, apologize for misleading them, and try to make financial restitution however I can. This wasn't what I'd expected to hear. That's going to be expensive, Tyler, and difficult. I know. I've calculated that I owe about $18,000 in refunds, plus whatever it costs to help students who got in trouble because of my work. It's going to take me years to pay it back, working restaurant jobs. What about the Financial Aid Office and the IRS? I'm meeting with both of them this week. I'm going to report all the income I didn't declare and accept whatever penalties they impose. I'm also meeting with the Academic Integrity Committee to report my own violations. I sat in my kitchen, staring out at the Arizona morning, processing what Tyler was telling me. This wasn't just an apology or a promise to do better. This was a commitment to accept full responsibility for his actions, regardless of the cost. Tyler, you understand this will probably mean expulsion from ASU? Yes. And I understand it means starting over completely. No college degree, no financial support, no easy path forward. Just me, figuring out how to build something real from Nothing. Are you sure about this? Once you report these violations, there's no going back. Grandpa, do you remember what you told me about judging character by how people treat those who've helped them most? Yes. Well, I've been thinking about David and those other students. They trusted me to help them, and I took advantage of that trust for money. They were the people who needed help most, and I made their situations worse. Tyler paused, and I could hear emotion in his voice. If I want to become someone worthy of the grandfather who sacrificed so much for me, I have to start by making things right with the people I hurt when I was at my worst. Something shifted in my chest at those words. This was the first time Tyler had connected his treatment of others to his treatment of me. The first time he'd seen the pattern of taking advantage of people who'd tried to help him. Tyler, this is going to be incredibly difficult. You're talking about giving up your entire future as you've planned it. No, Grandpa, I'm talking about building a future I can actually be proud of instead of one built on lies and exploitation. We talked for another hour about practicalities. Tyler had already contacted David and arranged to meet with him to apologize and discuss restitution. He'd made a list of all the other students and was working through them one by one. He'd scheduled appointments with university administrators and federal financial aid officials. Most impressively, Tyler had done all of this without asking me for money, advice, or help fixing his problems. Grandpa, there's one more thing I want to tell you. What's that? I've been thinking about what Jessica said to you, about how I described you as an embarrassment. I want you to know that the truth is exactly the opposite. Tyler, you don't need to. Yes, I do. Grandpa, you're a decorated veteran who served his country with honor. You built a successful business from nothing. You raised a daughter who became a wonderful woman. You took care of Grandma through her illness with devotion and grace. You've been generous beyond reason to a grandson who didn't deserve it. Tyler's voice was getting thick with emotion. You're not an embarrassment, Grandpa. You're everything I want to become. And if I have to spend the next 20 years proving that I can live up to the example you've set, then that's what I'll do. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine pride in Tyler. Not pride in his accomplishments or his lifestyle, but pride in his character, in his willingness to choose the difficult path, because it was the right path. That afternoon, I drove to ASU and found David in the student center. He was a thin young man with worn clothes and worried eyes, the kind of kid who looked like he carried the weight of his family's expectations on his shoulders. David, my name, is Will Johnson. I'm Tyler Johnson's grandfather. I wonder if I could speak with you for a few minutes. David's expression shifted from confusion to wariness. Is Tyler in more trouble? Because I already told the university everything I know about the paper he wrote for me. No, David, Tyler's not in more trouble. I'm here because I want to help fix some of the damage his choices caused. I handed David the check I'd written the night before. This should cover your tuition and expenses for next semester, and maybe help your family while you get back on track. David stared at the check like it was written in a foreign language. Sir, I can't accept this. I don't understand why you would... David, Tyler took advantage of your desperation and your trust. He convinced you to compromise your integrity because he needed money to maintain a lifestyle he couldn't afford. That was wrong, and as his grandfather, I feel some responsibility for the values he was taught. But, sir, this is $25,000. This is more money than my parents make in a year. David, what are you studying? Business administration. I want to start a company someday, maybe hire people from my neighborhood who need good jobs. Then take this money, finish your education with integrity, and build something that helps people instead of taking advantage of them. Show Tyler what it looks like when someone uses opportunity to lift others up instead of tearing them down. David's eyes filled with tears. Sir, I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Just be the kind of man Tyler should have been. The kind of man who uses his advantages to help people instead of exploit them. That evening, Tyler called to tell me about his meeting with David. Grandpa, David told me what you did, about the check. I hope you're not upset that I interfered. Upset? Grandpa, I'm overwhelmed. You helped fix a problem I created, even though you had every right to let me face the consequences alone. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Grandpa, do you know what David told me when I apologized to him? What's that? He said he could see where I came from. He said any young man who had a grandfather like you should have turned out better. And that meant the problem wasn't your influence, it was my choices. Smart young man. He also said something else. He said you showed him what it looks like when someone with resources uses them to lift people up instead of maintain their own comfort. He said you'd given him a model for the kind of businessman he wants to become. I thought about David, working multiple jobs while trying to stay in school, carrying his family's hopes and dreams on his young shoulders. If my money could help him succeed honestly instead of Tyler succeeding dishonestly, it was the best investment I'd ever made. Tyler, what happens next for you? Next, I finish making restitution to the other students. I accept whatever consequences the university and government impose. I keep working at the restaurant and saving money, and I start building a life I can actually be proud of. And after that, maybe someday I'll be the kind of man who deserves a grandfather like you. As I hung up the phone, I realized that Tyler had finally learned the most important lesson I could teach him. That true success wasn't measured by what you could take from others, but by what you could give back to them. The boy, who'd been too busy to talk to his grandfather, had become a young man willing to sacrifice everything to make things right with people he'd wronged. That transformation was worth more than any money I'd ever spent on his education. 3 weeks later, I received a call that marked the end of one chapter in Tyler's life and the beginning of something entirely different. Grandpa, it's official. ASU voted to expel me from the university effective immediately. Tyler's voice was steady, not the panicked or bitter tone I might have expected from someone who'd just lost their college career. How are you feeling about that? Honestly, relieved. For the first time in 3 years, everyone knows exactly who I am and what I've done. No more lies, no more pretending, no more living in fear that someone will discover the truth. Tyler had spent the past 3 weeks systematically dismantling the web of deceptions he'd built around his life. He'd contacted all 15 students he'd defrauded, offering full refunds even though it meant years of debt. He'd reported his unreported income to the IRS and accepted a payment plan for back taxes and penalties. He'd testified before the university's Academic Integrity Committee about his own violations. What did the committee say when you testified against yourself? They said they'd never had a student voluntarily report their own academic fraud before. The dean told me that while my actions were unforgivable, my willingness to take full responsibility was, what did she call it, unprecedented in her 30 years of education. And the other students, the ones you contacted, that's been the hardest part, Grandpa. Some of them were angry, which I deserved, but others thanked me for being honest with them. Tyler's voice carried a note of wonder. There's this girl, Maria, who paid me to write 3 papers last semester. When I told her the truth about my situation and offered to refund her money, she said something that's been keeping me up at night. What did she say? She said that my willingness to sacrifice my own future to tell her the truth was the first honest thing anyone had done for her since she started college. She said most people would have just kept the money and let her continue thinking she'd gotten away with cheating. How did you respond to that? I told her that I'd learned from Someone very wise, that you can judge a person's character by how they treat the people who've helped them most. And that all of the students who paid me had been trying to help themselves through a desperate situation, and I'd taken advantage of that instead of actually helping. Something in Tyler's voice suggested he was processing lessons that went far beyond his immediate situation. "Grandpa, can I tell you something else that's been on my mind?" "Of course. I keep thinking about David, about the check you wrote him. Not just the money, but what it represented." "What do you think it represented?" "It represented the difference between using your resources to enable someone's worst behavior versus using them to support someone's best potential. For 3 years, you gave me money that allowed me to avoid growing up, avoid taking responsibility, avoid learning real values. But with David, you gave money that rewarded honesty, supported education, and encouraged integrity." Tyler paused, and I could hear him thinking. "I finally understand why you cut off my support. It wasn't punishment. It was the only way to force me to discover who I actually was, underneath all the lies and entitlement." "And who are you, Tyler? Underneath everything?" "I'm someone who has the potential to be better than I've been. Someone who can learn from his mistakes instead of just repeating them. Someone who can use his advantages to help people instead of exploit them." "What's your plan now?" "I'm staying in Phoenix. I've been promoted to assistant manager at the restaurant, which means steady hours and better pay. I'm going to spend the next year paying back every student I defrauded and saving money for community college." "Community college?" "I want to study social work. I want to help kids who are struggling academically find legitimate resources instead of shortcuts that will ruin their futures." The irony wasn't lost on me. Tyler, who'd profited from academic fraud, now wanted to help students avoid the same mistakes. "I've also been volunteering at a veterans center downtown on weekends." "Oh, I told them about my grandfather, about your service in Vietnam and your business career. They said they could use help with a program that connects veterans with young people who need mentoring." Tyler's voice carried a note of excitement. "Grandpa, there are so many kids who don't have strong family connections, who are making the same mistakes I made because nobody's teaching them about integrity and responsibility." "And you think you can teach them those things?" "I think I can. Teach them what happens when you don't learn those things. Sometimes the best teachers are people who've made the mistakes and faced the consequences." That evening, Tyler drove over to my house for the first time in 4 months. He arrived in a beat-up Honda Civic that belonged to his parents, wearing clothes that looked like they'd come from a thrift store rather than designer boutiques. But something about him was different. He stood straighter, made eye contact more directly, spoke with less bravado and more genuine confidence. "Grandpa, I brought something for you." Tyler handed me a manila folder, much like the ones I'd been keeping to document his deceptions. "This is a complete accounting of every dollar you spent supporting me for 3 years, along with my plan for paying it back." I opened the folder to find meticulously organized spreadsheets showing tuition payments, rent, car expenses, credit, card bills, everything totaling $243,147. "Tyler, you don't owe me this money." "Yes, I do. Not legally, but morally. You spent your retirement savings on someone who didn't appreciate or deserve it. I want to earn those opportunities instead of just taking them. Tyler, this will take you decades to repay on a restaurant salary. Then it takes decades. Grandpa, I need to prove to myself that I can earn what I took for granted. I need to understand the value of money by working for every dollar instead of just spending money that appeared in my account." Tyler opened the folder to another section. "This is my 5-year plan. Community college for 2 years while working full-time. Transfer to a 4-year university for social work degree. Graduate debt-free by working through school instead of borrowing money. Start repaying you at $500 per month beginning year 3. And what about your personal life? Dating, marriage, all the things 20-year-olds usually think about? Tyler smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression I'd seen from him in months. Grandpa, for the first time in my adult life, I know exactly who I am when I'm alone. I'm not trying to impress anyone or maintain any image. When I'm ready for a serious relationship, it'll be with someone who knows the real me, including my mistakes, and chooses to be with me anyway. We spent the next 2 hours talking about Tyler's plans, his work at the restaurant, his volunteer activities. For the first time since he'd left for college, Tyler asked about my life, my health, my daily routine, my memories of Sarah, my thoughts about aging and retirement. He listened with genuine interest instead of polite impatience. He asked follow-up questions. He shared memories of times we'd spent together before his college life had consumed his attention. "Grandpa, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Do you ever get lonely? Living alone in this house with all the memories of Grandma?" It was the first time Tyler had acknowledged that I might have my own struggles and needs, sometimes, but I've found that loneliness isn't really about being alone. It's about feeling disconnected from people who matter to you. Is that how you felt when I was ignoring you? Disconnected? Yes. It wasn't just that you were busy or living your own life. It was that you'd stopped seeing me as a person who had thoughts and feelings and experiences worth knowing about. Tyler nodded. "I've been thinking about that a lot, about how I treated you like a service provider instead of family." "What made you change your perspective?" "Working at the restaurant, actually. There's this older man, Robert, who busses tables. He's 73, works part-time to supplement his Social Security. When I first started, I barely noticed him, just another employee doing a simple job." Tyler leaned forward in his chair. "But then I started actually talking to him during breaks. Turns out Robert was a Marine in Vietnam, served 2 tours. He came home and worked in aerospace for 40 years, helped design components for the space shuttle program. His wife died 3 years ago, and his kids live across the country. He takes the bus to work because he can't afford car payments." "And what did you learn from Robert?" "I learned that every older person has an entire lifetime of experiences and wisdom that younger people ignore because we're too self-absorbed to pay attention. I realized that I'd been dismissing you the same way I initially dismissed Robert, as someone whose best years were behind them, instead of someone who had knowledge I could learn from." Tyler's voice carried genuine emotion. "Grandpa," Robert told me stories about Vietnam that helped me understand what you might have experienced. He talked about the work ethic of his generation, about building things that last, about taking care of family without expecting recognition. And I realized that instead of being embarrassed by those values, I should be proud to be connected to them. As Tyler prepared to leave that evening, he did something he hadn't done since childhood. He hugged me goodbye. Not a perfunctory embrace, but a real hug that lasted long enough to mean something. "Grandpa, would it be okay if I came by next Sunday? Maybe we could look through some photo albums, and you could tell me stories about your time in the service and building your business." "I'd like that very much, Tyler. And maybe you could tell me more about Grandma. I realize I never really asked about your life together, about what she was like, about how you built your marriage and family." As I watched Tyler drive away in his borrowed Honda, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine excitement about spending time with my grandson. Not because he needed something from me, but because he wanted to know me. The next Sunday would mark the beginning of a new kind of relationship, built on respect and genuine interest rather than financial dependence. For the first time since this whole situation began, I felt like I'd gotten my grandson back. 6 months after Tyler's expulsion from ASU, I sat in my kitchen on a Sunday morning, waiting for him to arrive for our weekly breakfast. These Sunday visits had become the highlight of my week. 3 hours of conversation, shared memories, and the kind of genuine family connection I'd thought was lost forever. Tyler arrived precisely at 8 a.m., as he had every Sunday for the past 4 months. He carried a grocery bag and a small wrapped package, his face bright with the kind of energy that comes from honest work and clear conscience. "Morning, Grandpa. I brought ingredients for those pancakes you taught me to make, and I have some news to share." Tyler had started calling me Grandpa again, instead of just Grandpa when he needed something. The difference in tone was subtle but significant. Affection instead of obligation. As Tyler mixed pancake batter in my kitchen, he talked about his week at the restaurant, his classes at Phoenix Community College, and his volunteer work at the Veterans Center. His life was busy but purposeful, structured around responsibilities he'd chosen rather than entitlements he'd expected. "What's your news?" I asked as we sat down to eat. Tyler grinned and handed me the wrapped package. "Open it." Inside was a framed photograph. Tyler shaking hands with an older man in a military uniform, both of them standing in front of a Veterans Center banner. "That's General Martinez, the director of the Veterans Center. Last week, he offered me a paid position coordinating their youth mentorship program. 20 hours a week, $15 an hour, working with teenagers who are at risk of dropping out of school. Tyler, that's wonderful. Congratulations." It gets better. The program includes a partnership with Phoenix Community College. They'll cover half my tuition costs if I maintain a 3.5 GPA and commit to working with the program for 2 years after graduation. I studied the photo, seeing something in Tyler's expression that had been missing for years, genuine pride in an accomplishment he'd earned through his own efforts. "There's something else, Grandpa. Something I've been working on that I wanted to tell you about in person." Tyler pulled out his phone and showed me a simple website, Second Chances Academic Support. I've been developing a tutoring program for students who are struggling academically, but instead of doing their work for them, we connect them with legitimate resources, study groups, writing centers, counseling services, time management coaching. Tyler scrolled through testimonials from students who'd used the service. "Remember David, the student you helped with that check? He's been volunteering with the program, sharing his story about how academic shortcuts can destroy your future. We've helped 18 students this semester, and none of them have had to compromise their integrity." I looked at Tyler, seeing the young man he'd become compared to the boy who'd hung up on me 10 months ago. The transformation wasn't just in his circumstances, it was in his character, his values, his understanding of what it meant to contribute rather than just consume. "Tyler, I'm proud of you, not for any specific achievement, but for who you've chosen to become." "Grandpa, I need to tell you something I should have said months ago." Tyler set down his coffee and looked me directly in the eyes. "I know you stopped supporting me financially to teach me a lesson about gratitude and responsibility. I know you could have handled the situation differently, could have just reduced my allowance or given me warnings or conditions. What are you getting at? You could have kept enabling my bad behavior because it was easier than confronting it. You could have kept sending money because you loved me and wanted to help, even though that help was actually hurting me." Tyler's voice carried a weight of understanding that surprised me. "But you chose the harder path. You chose to let me face consequences because you knew that was the only way I'd learn to be better. You sacrificed our relationship temporarily to save it permanently." "Tyler, Grandpa, I've been thinking about this for months. What you did wasn't revenge, it was rescue. You rescued me from becoming someone I couldn't live with, someone who would have spent his whole life taking advantage of people who cared about him." Tyler reached into his bag and pulled out an envelope. "This is the first installment." Inside was a check for $500, made out to me, signed with Tyler's careful handwriting. Tyler, we talked about this. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Not because you're demanding it, but because I need to prove to myself that I can earn what I once took for granted. Tyler pulled out a small notebook. I've been keeping track of every hour I work, every dollar I earn, every expense I pay. Do you know what I discovered? What's that? Money feels completely different when you earn it yourself. When I buy groceries with money I made serving tables, I appreciate the food more. When I pay my portion of rent with money I earned helping veterans, I appreciate having a safe place to sleep. Tyler flipped through pages of meticulous financial records. When I was spending your money, I never thought about where it came from or what you had to sacrifice to provide it. Money was just something that appeared in my account, and I felt entitled to spend it however I wanted. And now I understand that every dollar represents time, effort, and sacrifice. Your dollars represented a lifetime of work and careful saving. My dollars represent showing up even when I'm tired, treating customers with respect, even when they're rude, choosing to work instead of relaxing. Tyler closed the notebook and looked at me with an expression of complete sincerity. Grandpa, the best gift you ever gave me wasn't money. It was the chance to discover that I could be better than I was. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at this young man who bore the same name and face as my spoiled grandson, but had somehow transformed into someone I was genuinely proud to know. Tyler, can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Of course. The hardest thing I've ever done wasn't serving in Vietnam, or building my business, or even losing your grandmother. The hardest thing I've ever done was canceling those payments to you, knowing it might mean losing our relationship forever. Tyler's eyes filled with tears. The night I stopped the transfers, I sat in my recliner until 3 a.m. wondering if I was making the right choice. I kept thinking about all the times you'd called me when you were little, all the games we'd played, all the dreams we'd shared about your future. Grandpa, you saved our relationship. You saved me. I gambled everything on the hope that underneath all the entitlement and deception, there was still the good boy I'd helped raise. The boy who used to say he wanted to be just like his grandpa when he grew up. Tyler stood up and walked around the table to where I was sitting. He knelt down next to my chair and took my hands in his. Grandpa, I do want to be just like you. When I grow up, I want to be someone who works hard, treats people with respect, takes care of family, and uses whatever advantages I have to lift others up, instead of just improving my own situation. Tyler, you're already becoming that person. Do you really think so? I looked at this young man, working multiple jobs while going to school, volunteering his time to help struggling students, living simply so he could pay back money he'd never been required to repay, building relationships based on genuine care, rather than financial benefit. Tyler, I think you're becoming the man I always hoped you'd be, not because of anything I taught you, but because of choices you've made to learn from your mistakes and grow from your failures. We sat in my kitchen as the Sunday morning sun streamed through the windows, talking about Tyler's plans for the future, his work with veterans and students, his dreams of starting a non-profit organization that would help young people avoid the mistakes he'd made. Grandpa, can I ask you one more thing? Anything. When you were my age, did you ever think about the kind of grandfather you wanted to be someday? What do you mean? I've been thinking about how I want to be remembered by my future grandchildren. What kind of example I want to set, what kind of values I want to pass down. Tyler paused, choosing his words carefully. I want to be the kind of grandfather who teaches through example instead of lectures, who shows love through wisdom rather than just money, who earns respect through character rather than demanding it through authority. Tyler, those are good goals. I want to be the kind of grandfather you've been to me, patient enough to let me make mistakes, strong enough to let me face consequences, loving enough to keep believing in me even when I didn't deserve it. As Tyler prepared to leave that morning, he did something that had become our weekly tradition. He asked what he could do to help me during the upcoming week. Grocery shopping, yard work, home repairs, whatever I needed. Actually, Tyler, there is something. Name it. I've been thinking about that check you brought today. Your first repayment. What? About it? I want you to take it back. Tyler's face fell. Grandpa, please don't take away my chance to make this right. I'm not taking it away, I'm redirecting it. I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder I'd been preparing for weeks. Tyler, I want you to use that $500 as the first donation to your Second Chances academic support program. And I want you to use it to help a student who's struggling the way David was struggling. Tyler stared at the folder, which contained legal documents establishing a formal non-profit organization. I've been working with lawyers to set up a foundation that will support your tutoring program. The money I would have spent on your college lifestyle will now fund legitimate academic support for students who are willing to work hard and maintain their integrity. Tyler's hands shook as he flipped through the paperwork. The Will and Sarah Johnson Foundation for Academic Integrity. Initial funding, $200,000. Director, Tyler Johnson. Tyler looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. Grandpa, this is too much. I don't deserve... Tyler, this isn't about what you deserve. This is about what you can become. You've learned the difference between taking advantage of desperate students and actually helping them. Now, I want you to help them on a larger scale. But this is your retirement money, Grandma's life insurance money. Tyler, this money was always meant to invest in your future. For 3 years, I invested it in the wrong thing, your lifestyle. Now I'm investing it in the right thing, your character and your ability to help others. Tyler stood in my kitchen, holding the papers that would allow him to turn his biggest mistake into his greatest contribution. Grandpa, I don't know what to say. Say you'll use this opportunity to prove that people can change. Say you'll help other students avoid the mistakes you made. Say you'll build something that makes both of us proud. I promise, all of it. As Tyler left that morning, carrying the foundation papers and his redirected repayment check, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Sarah died. Complete peace about the legacy we were leaving behind, the money I'd spent trying to give. Tyler, an easy life, had nearly destroyed him. The money I was now investing in his character and his service to others would help him become the man I'd always known he could be. 6 months later, the Will and Sarah Johnson Foundation had helped 43 students complete their education without compromising their integrity. Tyler had been accepted to Arizona State University's social work program with a full scholarship based on his community service and his essay about learning from failure. And every Sunday morning, we still had breakfast together in my kitchen, talking about everything and nothing, grandfather and grandson, connected not by financial dependence, but by genuine love and mutual respect. The boy who'd been too busy for his grandfather had become a man who understood that family, integrity, and service to others were the only things truly worth being busy with. And you? What would you have done in my situation? Would you have cut off support to teach a lesson about gratitude and responsibility? Or would you have continued enabling bad behavior because it was easier than confronting it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell, because everyone deserves a second chance to become who they're meant to be. Thanks for listening to Tyler's story. And remember, sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone you love is the chance to discover their own strength.